Bledsoe was arrested.
Patrick Montgomery was in court.
Jonathan Manapa will stay in federal custody.
No, I don't take responsibility at all.
So 40-year-old Mississippi resident and Marine veteran James McGrew recorded as others were climbing the inauguration scaffolding on January 6th. And he was yelling and egging them on. He was saying things like, "Let's go, take the step." McGrew then snaked through the crowd. He reached the front of a police line. He was one of the first to break through that line. This was as officers were being assaulted. McGrew then continued to incite the mob. He screamed things like, "This is what freedom looks like, 4 more years, come on, let's go." And then right before entering the Capitol, he yelled, quote, "We took this thing." After entering the Capitol, a female officer yelled at McGrew and some other people he was with, and she said to get out, and they yelled back at her, quote, "You get out." Then McGrew was seen on video. He reached over a banister and he struck her with his hand. And then as McGrew ascended the interior stairs, he was telling another member of the mob, quote, "They hit us first. She should have never touched one of us." So typical abuser, right? You made me do it. You made me hit you. So after that, McGrew traveled to the old Senate chamber. Once again, he maneuvered to the front of the crowd. He was confronting officers, and officers positioned themselves in front of a staircase. They were trying to keep the mob from ascending that set of stairs. So McGrew was seen on video in that area reaching and grabbing underneath an officer's helmet. After those officers were overrun, McGrew climbed that set of stairs. He encountered another line of officers, and he yelled at these officers and said, quote, "We're coming in here whether you like it or not," and, quote, "Fight with us, not against us." And McGrew was recording while all of this was going down. And when the officers refused to move, McGrew shouted out their names and their badge numbers. A while later, McGrew entered the Capitol Rotunda, and this is where officers were trying to push everybody out. They were physically trying to remove the mob. So first, McGrew pushed one officer, and then he struck a second officer. Then he kind of fell back. He retreated back into the crowd. Then he comes back a short time later, and he's screaming at the officers about stitches in his head from his time as a Marine. And an officer was seen and heard telling him very calmly, quote, "Just leave, man, come on." McGrew screams at him, quote, "You leave, this is our house." And then as officers were pushing the mob out, they were using their batons, they were holding him sideways. McGrew struck one officer, then he lunged for his baton. And then when another officer approached McGrew and the others, and he was telling them to back up, McGrew started physically struggling with that officer. And then he tried to grab another officer's baton and he yelled, quote, "Quit hitting people." So another officer steps in and he tells him, quote, "Just back up, man." So McGrew yells out, quote, "Lock arms." So then he and others lock arms. They refuse to move. They refuse to budge. And during this time, McGrew is screaming at the officers. He's calling them traitors. He's telling them that they're trying to defend the people who want to defund the police. And he yelled, quote, "We ain't leaving. There are way more of us than y'all. Way more. There's 2 million people right there behind us. 2 million more people who are tired of this shit." A short time later, officers again tried to push McGrew out of the rotunda. McGrew grabs an officer's coat and pushes against him. Eventually, McGrew was physically removed from the building, but he still didn't leave the Capitol grounds. He then made his way down to the Lower West Terrace Tunnel, where he took part in that pushing, that heave-ho effort against the officers. And he yelled at them, quote, "We're here all night." Then someone in the crowd handed McGrew a large handrail. It had a metal hook on the end. So McGrew pulls this pole back over his head. He launches it into the tunnel like a javelin with the metal hook pointed towards the police. So according to the prosecutor, this handrail appeared to hit another member of Trump's mob and an officer's visor. But in a radio show in April of 2022, McGrew told the audience, quote, they're saying I used a flagpole as a weapon, which is, I can't say much more about it other than that, but I can tell you that it's completely untrue. The incident that they are talking about is literally 2 seconds of me. I will say this, it is on video and everything I've done is on video, and it can be refuted that my claims are true because the video will show that, is that I tossed this flagpole not knowing it was in the direction of officers, and there's no victim. There's no victim statement. The flagpole didn't land in a manner that would have caused any type of danger. So yeah, he didn't know the cops were there, you guys. And then McGrew also published an article in which he blamed the police for the violence. And he wrote in part, quote, "Quickly and instinctively, my training as a Marine would kick in as I found myself running to the front lines to peacefully persuade metropolitan police officers and Capitol policemen to stop injuring and inciting violence upon peaceful, patriotic American families. The Marine Corps motto, once a Marine, always a Marine, echoing in my mind." Such a hero, huh? Yeah. He definitely has a talent for fiction and comedy. And it's funny how all these guys claim, oh, the video evidence, that's going to vindicate me. It's going to show I didn't do anything wrong. And then all it does is prove that they're guilty as hell. And even after admitting to his crimes, McGrew did another interview and he said, quote, "It's like they just threw a bunch of stuff against the wall and whatever sticks without any evidence, just threw up against the wall and said, you know what, we'll find the evidence later." And then in another interview, McGrew claimed that he was only at the Lower West Terrace Tunnel because he was looking for his mother. Then in the same interview, like 2 seconds later, he quickly changes his story and says, "Oh, I just went there because I heard people yelling for help. I heard people saying they couldn't breathe." And in a hearing about McGrew's plea deal, he lied and told the court that he only did the last interview to discuss January 6th inmates' access to religious services. McGrew also changed his story numerous times when he was asked about hitting that female officer. And he admitted that he actually doesn't have stitches in his head from his time in the military. So could this guy be any more full of shit? It's another George Santos. So McGrew was arrested on May 28th of 2021, and he was charged with 2 counts of assaulting officers, civil disorder, obstructing an official proceeding, entering a restricted building or grounds, 2 counts of disorderly conduct in a Capitol building, 2 counts of physical violence, and parading in a Capitol building. And many of these charges carried an increased penalty because he used a deadly or dangerous weapon. In May of 2022, McGrew pleaded guilty to assaulting officers. So he was looking at up to 8 years in prison, 3 years of probation, and $250,000 in fines. And for once, the prosecutor requested a legitimate sentence. The government asked the court to sentence McGrew to 78 months in prison, 3 years of probation, and $2,000 in restitution. This is most likely due to the fact that McGrew has been convicted of 16 crimes as an adult alone for things like assault, contempt of court, DUI. He was also arrested at least 31 additional times, but those arrests didn't result in conviction. And when he took part in the Capitol attack, he was on parole for 2 prior offenses, one involving theft of a vehicle and the other involving shoplifting. So Chief U.S. District Judge Beryl Howe presided over McGrew's case, and I couldn't locate any details about what was said at the sentencing hearing, but she sentenced McGrew to 78 months in prison, 3 years of probation, a $5,000 fine, and $2,000 in restitution. So finally a sentence that fits the crime. Given this guy's propensity towards violence and his inability to acknowledge that he's not a victim or a hero, we're probably going to hear about him again. We're probably going to hear about him in the future. I can almost guarantee it. So I will have more for you, I'm sure, about this guy in the future. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please donate. Please become a monthly supporter. Take care, and I'll talk with you soon.